Hey everyone, and welcome to the Phileas Club. This is episode 88 for May 2017, Alpha Male Handshakes. Hello everyone, and welcome back to the Phileas Club. This is episode 88. It's May 2017. The weather here in rural Finland is absolutely wonderful, and I'm really glad to be on the show because there's a lot to talk about. My name is Patrick Beja, and I'm joined today again by two of my favorite American people in the whole world, namely Brian and Tony, who are kind enough to be carrying the mantle, becoming the post-children people for the entirety of the American conservative people, right? Thank you for being here, Brian. Thank you for being here, Brian. How are you doing?
Good. How are you?
I'm excellent. It's really early for you in Las Vegas, but you're soldiering on and staying with us. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
And Tony, how are you, good sir?
I'm doing very well. Thank you for the invitation.
Thank you for coming again. And I really want to, once again, mention how thankful I am that you guys agreed to be on the show to sort of be the representatives of the conservative side of the political spectrum in the U.S. because, you know, I thought really long and hard about how I wanted to do this show, this episode specifically, and I figured I already know what all of my liberal friends are going to say and think about everything that's been happening, particularly in the U.S., and what I'm really interested in hearing about is what the other side of the aisle thinks in a collected and reasonable, hopefully, manner. I'm sure I'll have a couple of words about all of that as well. But thank you guys for being here and for offering that perspective.
No problem. Thank you.
And we also have a newcomer being very quiet in the background. Guy is joining us from Brazil. How are you doing, Guy?
Hi, everyone. It's actually pretty early here, too. I just woke up, but everything's going to be fine.
Yeah, it will. Maybe not, you know, the world might be, as we joked about in before we started recording with Brian, the world might be looking like a weird movie, but, you know, for the morning in Brazil, from now until you have to go to work, I'm sure it's going to be okay, right?
Yeah, I feel like we're in a big House of Cards episode.
It does feel like that sometimes. You know, I follow a couple of... I don't even follow them. I see House of Cards parody Twitter accounts, and a lot of what they say is basically the reality stole all of our ideas, and like we had writers coming up with things that were rejected that now look like like what's happening in the world, and... Yeah,
it was actually pretty funny last week, I think, or the other. The actual House of Cards tweeted in Portuguese about what's going on with here. They said that it's getting complicated to compete against us, against our crazy politics in the show.
What's happening in Brazil? Yeah, we heard a little bit about that. But, we'll get back to that, of course. But I think one of the things, what I would like to start with is the aftermath of the French election, because we had a really long French special episode for the last show, and I hope the listeners enjoyed that episode. It was really specific in topic and kind of long, but I think really it was. Yeah, you enjoyed it?
Yeah, I really did. Thank you.
Ah, that's cool. I was really nervous because it feels, when we talk about something specific that's not my home country, I'm like, yeah, that's interesting because I'm interested in it. the home country thing is like, are people gonna care? But apparently people liked it. So, but yeah, so since then, we've had the actual second round of the election. And as most of you know, I'm sure, Macron, the center candidate, won handily, not as decisively as in 2002 when there was a traditional candidate against the far right. But still, I can't remember if the debate had happened when we recorded. I think it did. Yeah, actually it did. And so the meltdown of the far-right candidate, Marine Le Pen, by everyone's analysis, made her lose about 5 points in the election. So she really wasn't being coherent or efficient, and apparently that didn't help her at all. So another way we're different from the U.S., I suppose. What's been happening since then is kind of a weird. Of course, we're in the honeymoon period with the new president, but so everything he's doing is kind of like, oh yeah, he's doing this well and that well, and here it's kind of weird because he has that one minister who's embroiled in some. We're not certain whether it's shady or not employment of his family member, but apparently it's not that shady because they were actually working, but we're not sure. So there's a little bit of controversy there. But by and large, it seems like he's managing to stay coherent and stay and build a majority out of that party that didn't exist a few years ago. And we have the parliamentary elections happening in a few weeks now, and so that's what we usually call round 3 of the election, and that is going to confirm or not confirm his ability to govern, because of course if he doesn't have a majority in the parliament, he's not going to be able to get any laws passed. And I would not have thought that he would get a majority. He would have needed to compromise and to make alliances, as most people do it in most countries, or not most people, but a lot of people work like that. A lot of governments work like that in many countries. But it seems like he has a slim chance of actually getting a majority. He's getting a lot of momentum thanks to the election, and a lot of people are seeing him as relatively, people are looking favorably on him at this point. Of course, it's only been a couple of weeks since the election, so we'll see what happens a few months in. But for the incredibly important parliamentary election, things are looking a little bit brighter than I might have thought, for him, of course, than I might have thought right after the election. He's building.
Do you think people are looking for change on that? Do you think there's enough wanting there on the change to make that?
It's really the left-wing party, the Parti Socialiste, is in disarray and has been since the election. The surprise is coming from the right-wing party, the Republicans, who is, of course, strong, but not looking as strong as they might have been before, when he was elected. Macron is very skillfully calling to the right side of the political spectrum enough, center right, that he's pulling in some of those right-wing representatives and electorate, of course. So he's being really crafty and kind of clever in that way. And so we'll see what happens in a few weeks. But so I'm curious how you guys perceived the election, the French election, and how you heard about it. Maybe Brian.
I was following it because, you had your special on it. And of course, I was always interested. And I read the Wall Street Journal too. And there was a lot of press about it going on. People were just, I think the real thing was people were looking at Marine Le Pen. They were seeing her. They were thinking maybe she might have a stronger show. I'll be honest, I wasn't sure about that. I didn't think she'd be that strong. Better than what her dad did, but not. So
you didn't think there was a parallel between that, especially since you're in the U.S., between that and the election of Trump? You didn't see it like two similar things?
Not so much. I mean, like you say, with France. France is always a little bit more left, even for Europe. They're always a little bit. There's a little bit more of left wing strain there in France. So I would have been completely shocked if Le Pen would have won. I mean, it would have been out of the blue, kind of like with Trump.
Yeah, I guess that the reason why we thought it might happen was that it happened before, but the fact that something unlikely happened a couple of times doesn't mean it's going to happen again. Tony, what about you? How did you, if at all, did your colleagues, friends, or media you watch discuss this and what's happening with the election when Macron won? Did you do you have a view on all of this at all?
Yeah, as far as colleagues and friends, it's really wasn't really a topic of conversation. I caught some pieces here and there, a lot of it honestly through you, and the media that I consume. It wasn't a huge piece of that. I wasn't really surprised either. It seemed like the numbers were kind of bearing out the way it was going to be prior to the election. So it seemed that was the way things were going. At least that's what, the people that are supposed to know were saying. Of course, again, like Brian kind of said, that's not what happened here, but it seemed to be going that way. So it wasn't really surprising. I agree with Brian. I don't see it being an apples to apples comparison of what went on here. Although I just don't know. I don't have that much familiarity with the French people and the sentiment there, but it seemed that way.
And I think one of the things that was pretty strongly felt, at least for the people who were happy about that result. And remember, if you listen to the previous show, there were people who were unhappy with the result on the right side, on the far right side, and on the left with the Mélenchon voters, because they were unhappy. They feel like everyone on the right of their party is too much to the right. So they were also not super happy. They feel like Macron is also a capitalist, pro big business kind of personality, and that's not what the country needs. So except for those people who were unhappy, I think there was a lot of relief, not just for the country, but also a sense that the bad spell of super nationalistic voting has been maybe not broken, but at least given a stop, made a pause, and sort of showing the importance that France being pro-Europe through its presidential election really gives a solid partnership between France and Germany to keep the construction of Europe and maybe fix the problems, the issues that we've accumulated along the way, but making sure that we have a solid partnership to continue the strength of a common market, a common, union, really. And so that is that there's that feeling that election, even though it's one election in France, is sort of altering, shaping the world, really, because it means Europe can stay strong, and if Europe can stay strong, it gives a partner for an equal partner for discussions with Russia, with the U.S., with China, and it shapes the world in a very significant way, and much more. If it hadn't been Macron hadn't been elected and Europe had been in question, of course, the entire dynamic, the geopolitical dynamic of the entire world would have changed. So there's a domino effect there, or lack of domino effect there, that is incredibly important. And I'm curious, again, Guy from Brazil, you've had your own issues, so I'm not sure you've had to you've had time to report on all of this in your media, but I'm still asking the question.
No, actually, in the last couple of weeks, the French election was something that was on the media. I happened to pass by some TVs sometimes, and they were talking about it, but it was not so deep. They were not so You're not going so deep on the matter. Like, what would happen if Macron won? What would happen if Le Pen won? They were just saying like, oh, Macron has 70% of the votes, and Marie Le Pen has 30 or something like that. They never went too far to say what each side wanted to do, what each side said. It was something really, really macro, you know. They didn't went into many details about what was happening. But it was decided last week, right?
It was 2 weeks ago, actually.
Two weeks ago. So
yeah, so a bit more even.
Okay, so I guess there was one paper that did like a more in-depth news about it, but just that, because the time that we're having here in Brazil right now is not that good for international politics news. So I guess we're actually kind of lost on what's happening outside of here.
Well, it's funny because, and we'll get to that, but it's funny because in France, of course, with the election, it seemed like for French people, it's a huge deal, and especially with the ramifications for Europe and then for the world. But it might be one of those cases where, well, it's a huge deal for us because it's happening here, but really the only country where a huge deal is a huge deal for everyone, at least in the common conception of everyone, is the U.S. And any other country, if something happens, it's like, oh, yeah, it's important to you guys, but we don't really care. At least that's the image. But Brian?
Well, I was just thinking, I thought with the foreign policy writers I follow or read, and I thought Phileas, his collapse, I think, was kind of a big surprise. And Macron
was it covered in the U.S. media?
Yeah, in the Wall Street Journal with Bret Stephens and the other writer, I can't remember just this certain second. They were talking about that. That was certainly something that was discussed. How Phileas, like I said, it was basically just a kind of a collapse. I mean, he did okay, I guess, in the election, but he came in third. But the fact that Macron, kind of came out of the outside. He was the dark horse. Came on the outside. To get that. Never ran for office before and everything. Yeah, it was very interesting.
It's funny because it's really Macron was really many people will dispute that, but he was the outside candidate in the same way that Trump was in many ways, except he is reasonable and collected. He's still a way for the electors to tell everyone else, well, we've had enough of you, and we want something new. Of course, he's not, an outsider of politics. He's done the traditional schools, and he's been in the government for 2 years, right. Sure, but he's been in the government and all of this, but still. All right, let's move on to something else. The Trump trip to Europe and to the Middle East before that. And I will have at some point at the end of the show a report by Turki, who sent us a little pre-recorded segment about that trip. And you'll hear it at the end of the show. I did ask him more about that Ivanka Trump adulation that apparently happened over Twitter. It seemed like because he mentioned it, I didn't really hear about it, but he mentioned it, and it seemed like she was receiving like marriage proposals and love letters by some, but it's very silly, and it was very a joke, of course. But so he's reporting on how it went there. Of course, when he's talking about what the media reaction and everything was happening about the Trump trip, keep in mind that Saudi Arabia is not a country where you can say anything you want, so it's likely that the opinions were a little bit regulated, let's say, in that in the media in that context. But anyway, we'll have that towards the end of the show. I did want to mention that charade, that silly media blowout that we've had about Trump handshakes. And I'm sure, I'm guessing you guys have seen the handshake with Macron. Maybe you haven't, and I've seen it because it's Macron and it's France. But Macron was holding his own on the Trump handshake, and like actually squeezing Trump's hand so hard that his knuckles were getting white, and like there's this whole analysis of the Trump handshake now, and there's also a GIF of Trump shoving aside the Prime Minister of Montenegro to get in front of the pictures, which is so cringeworthy. And I understand this is just like theater, and it's not the thing that matters. But I have to say, and this is maybe the liberal in me coming out again, and maybe you guys will tell me it's not that important, but I really resent the fact that his, Trump's alpha male, really bully behavior is forcing us into having those considerations. Like, he's shoving people around and he's shaking hands super hard to show that, like, he's a real man. And it's like, I resent him for making the conversations about that. And I resent that we're having those conversations, even though at this point, it is important. Like, it is important that Macron speaks his language and shakes his hand hard to show that he's an equal partner, or whatever, animalistic language we need to get into with that. So I'm curious if you guys see it in that way in any way, or if it's just, it really doesn't matter. I don't know. Anyone?
Go ahead, please.
Sorry, go ahead. I think a handshake is just a handshake. I don't think that you have to make it really strong to show, especially if you're the newly elected president of France. You don't have to make it extremely strong to show that you were an equal with them. I think that Macron's going to show that along the way with the things he does, being president. But I've seen the GIF, and I didn't know that was actually a thing.
It was definitely a thing for us. It was discussed everywhere.
Oh my God, I had no idea, because to me it was just a funny GIF.
Okay.
But I think that it's maybe some kind of reluctancy towards Donald Trump. But
yeah, it's just that everyone knows. I think in his social media team, Macron's social media team was like, those handshakes are turning into memes. You have to make sure you don't look weak. And also to show. Okay. I think I wouldn't be surprised if that was the way it went. But Tony, maybe I'll turn to you. You're a, can I call you a values voter? And you told us that you voted for Trump for the pro-life stance, and that was really important to you. I don't know how it relates to the alpha male handshake thing, but I'm curious to know if it impacts you or your surroundings at all. Like, if you have friends who are like, yeah, he's a strong leader and he needs to show strength, and that's how you show strength. I don't know, but what do you think?
Yeah, I actually don't get into a lot of politics in my daily life, so talking about my friends in person just doesn't happen too much. I get plenty of that on Twitter. So, but you're right. I would consider myself a values voter, and I agree with Guy, but maybe from a slightly different angle. It's just a handshake is just a handshake. Yes, it looks silly, and a lot of the things he does look silly. That's there's no disputing that. But he's under such, in my opinion, heavier scrutiny than we've had in the past, that every single thing that he does is people are pouring through every photo, every handshake to make a GIF, every video to see him shoving a guy aside. And I'm not disputing that happened. Of course, I might.
What do you think of it then?
What actually? I don't know what was actually happening. I looked at it because, honestly, I'm biased. I admit that. But when I see someone post a GIF that is making fun of Donald Trump, I look closely to see, okay, is what they're saying happened really happening? I looked at the Melania smacking his hand away several times. There's no context. It looks like that's what's happening. I don't know. There's no context. Again, with the shoving aside of the other leader, I don't have context. I looked at it. the other guy, I believe, was the Montenegro. Is that what we said?
Yes,
where we said he was
the
from?
Prime Minister of Montenegro.
Yes,
who,
the
by
Prime
the way,
Minister of
Putin doesn't like at all. Just as a side note.
Now, see that? There you go, Patrick. But I watched that. I saw the surprise on his face when Trump touched his shoulder, and then I saw a smile on his face when he saw it was Trump. And that's what. And he could be a complete professional turning an insult of being shoved aside into I'm a smooth politician and now I'm going to smile at you and everything's going to be good. Or it could have been
he's not going to
Trump.
Smack him in the face. Obviously, he
of
has
course
to smile,
not.
right?
Of course not.
Yeah.
But at the same time, Trump's, people refer to him as a man's man. Men's men smack each other on the shoulder to say hi, and that happens. Did that happen? I don't know. But there's no context. And that's what I'm saying. I've had men who are my great friends hurt me by smacking me on the shoulder to say hi, Tony. It happens.
But that's not smacking on the shoulder. He actually shoves him aside. And I will say, to be fair, the pictures we've seen with the Pope, like looking super grim, and him in front, they look horrendous, I admit. But if you look into it a little bit more, you'll see other pictures where the Pope is smiling, and you'll see pictures where the Pope does that same face with Obama next to him. So
exactly.
I understand what you're saying, but still, he did shove the guy, and his handshakes are weird alpha male brutish handshakes. I mean, I understand that you need the context, but don't you feel like there's something that I mean, I want to say to this.
You have to look at it a little bit from the point of view. Yeah, I mean, Donald Trump does the alpha male stuff, but you also have to look at the point of view that he's a billionaire businessman, and I think that's how he has done business. I mean, I think if you look at Trump in a certain way, of how he views things, how he does things, because that's how he's been doing things probably for many, many years.
That doesn't make it cool, though. Or
I'm not saying it does, but I mean, he's dealt with other billionaires. And I've been around, I've been around other guys, in law enforcement, military, and that's what you got to give a firm handshake. You can't give a limp handshake. Believe me, that you get a look if you did that happens, and you give someone else a look, you a limp wristed handshake. You're gonna be like, oh really? Okay.
So basically, you're saying, I mean.
In part, yeah. Yeah,
it's you two are saying, you three actually are saying it's just a handshake, and it shouldn't be considered. Maybe for me, it's a handshake that's a symbol of his character and what he is and what he does. But maybe I'm reading into it a little bit more than other people do. Let's move on,
Patrick,
to.
I have a question.
Yeah, sure.
Just a cultural thing. Do professionals in, we'll say, Europe get trained on the proper handshake? And if so, how? Because I have been trained as a professional in the United States to give a proper handshake. And as Brian was saying, you're trained to give a strong handshake as a professional in the United States. Like you said, limp-wristed handshake, not good. In fact, the picture that they showed of Trump with his fingers open in the handshake, I know you saw that one. That looked like of course, that's an instant in time. Who knows what really happened? But that picture looks like a bad handshake on his part. Well, so I'm just curious about that.
I wouldn't say we're trained in handshakes, but certainly there are guidelines. Like you don't want to. I mean, I think everyone I've ever spoken to has a profound disgust for the limp handshake. It's like it feels icky, and I completely understand that. I wouldn't say so far to say as that we're trained, but the difference there is that his handshakes are extremely aggressive. So it's kind of the opposite, the other end of the spectrum. A limp handshake is icky, but an aggressive handshake is offensive. And I think that's why it feels, especially in the context of political relations that are delicate, it feels like that kind of aggression is brutish and bullyish, and that's what I dislike in the symbolism of it. So,
sure, I understand that, and I don't want you to think that we spend hours, days, weeks learning how to shake hands, but it is brought up in it is brought up.
All right, today is our daily trading for handshaking. Get in line with your partners.
I definitely think it's a mine is bigger than yours kind of thing going on.
Of course, it absolutely is. But I mean, if I've ever seen some sign of compensating for something, geez. But all right, handshakes don't matter. Let me ask you guys about something else. Apparently, the trip is going pretty well over the media. It seems like it's even getting some of the controversies a little bit overshadowed, and he's looking presidential, and he's actually not tweeting as much because he's not watching TV every night. So that's helping, and maybe he's gonna learn something from this. But there are a couple of things I want to talk about. The dismissal of Comey, which was very surprising and very much discussed for all of us. And I know, Brian, you weren't as outraged as maybe some others might have been. And I want to talk about the healthcare thing as well, because that's something, you know, as open and understanding as I can be on many, many controversial topics, that one I don't get. But the dismissal of Comey, first of all, it seems to me pretty clear that it's, you know, at least suspicious, and we all know why we think it's suspicious. He's heading the agency that's investigating the links to Russia from the campaign, and the person who's at the center of that investigation is dismissing the head of the agency. So it seems to me like it's, at the very least, it should raise eyebrows from everyone on every side of the aisle. Brian, you were telling me on Twitter that you weren't as, you know, offended, or your eyebrows weren't as raised, I guess, as mine.
Oh, I saw it coming. I mean, I didn't see Comey surviving as long as he did, to be honest. I think part of the timing on that was that was a part of the Trump administration filling up slots in their administration, because it was like the firing came like 2 weeks after the assistant attorney general Rubenstein was appointed and took office, and I think that's when it seems like there have been discussions about it, or been considerations about it, and then when Rubenstein came in, that it kind of got going. It's just that whole debacle. I really think that what
you
Comey
think it's
did
just timing. You think it has nothing to do with the investigation on Russia?
The investigation's been going on since June, July of last year. It's not like the investigation doesn't get shut down because the director is there or isn't there. It still goes on. It's
of course
still
it
going
doesn't.
on.
But you're telling me that the person you're investigating firing the head of the agency has no bearing on the investigation itself? It doesn't, you know, it doesn't affect it. It doesn't show a sign that
it didn't
there's
affect it. I'm not saying it doesn't. I'm sure it has some effect, but it doesn't stop the investigation. I mean, I haven't said anything saying that it has affected the investigation. And in fact, before the firing, the FBI was saying they had enough money. You know, everything seemed to be like they were looking into it. I think. I mean, I'm rather low. I don't really care for special prosecutors or special counsels to be appointed, but I got to say, Robert Mueller getting appointed in that role for this, that was a good choice. I thought Robert Mueller was a good choice. I think you know, he's going to do his job, and you know, and that's what's going to happen. I think that was a good choice for a special counsel. But I mean, first of all, Comey, though, I mean, what he did in October, right before the election, that was just terrible. You know, and you can say maybe it helped Trump or whatever. I just thought it was terrible. It was like,
I think everyone
we
agrees.
think we got something. Oh no, we don't have anything. Nothing's here. I'm like, really? I mean, you know, is that how you? He can't run his office like that. He can't be a director. Director of FBI.
For those who don't remember, he was saying maybe we have something on Clinton, and oh, by the way, so it brought back the whole email issue and like. Okay, so
right with Huma Abedin's computer, they found emails on her husband, Anthony Weiner's, and he said, "Oh, we might have something." Made a big press conference, and then it comes back, "Oh, yeah, it was nothing." You're like,
but you think Trump fired him because of that? I know that's the line in the Conservative Party.
That was part of it. That certainly plays a big part of it. I think it's just. I think a lot of it was they'd. I'm honestly, I thought he had to go. I didn't think there was any point. I mean, he
And you don't think there's an appearance of impropriety here?
Oh, there's certainly an
appearance. It doesn't bother. Yeah. Okay, let me ask you the question differently. Does it not bother you at all?
Does it bother me at all
that Trump fired Comey when he was investigating, when his agency was investigating the Russia connections?
That his agency was like 6 months into an investigation.
It doesn't asking really bother if it bothers you at all or not. You're saying
not very much, no.
Okay.
Because Tony, I know how the system works. I know how I have a background in investigations. I know how that stuff works. I mean, bosses will can come and go, but the work still continues. So
sure, but
I mean, if they
came down and said,
down and said to halt the investigation, if he told Comey to halt the investigation, and then Comey said no, and then he fired him for that, then that would be a big problem. But,
well, Comey is now saying that he's not sure what Trump told him amounts to how do you call it? Like in stopping justice? What's the word?
Obstruction
of justice. He's saying, well, I'm not quite sure. So it seems there were some words exchanged, and okay, well, I guess we don't know. But you know what bothers me is that ultimately there's always this defense of, well, we don't really know. And sure, we don't really know. I understand this. But for the Fillon thing, which you mentioned, we didn't really know. We had lots of suspicions, and there was enough appearance of impropriety and some issues that we decided, you know what, that's not okay. And I'm not saying that I want every conservative person in the U.S. to get down in the street and call for Trump's head. What I would love to see is some people on the conservative side, and I know there are some, but who would go, you know what, that I agree, that doesn't look good. And it's not okay that this is how it happened. It doesn't have to be, it is obviously obstruction of justice and he should be, but it seems that with all of those...
it was handled badly.
But it's not just that it was handled
so badly. Well, I thought, and I don't really
the
care
thing
for
with Sessions having had contact with Russians, and all of those. At some point, it's not just this one thing. It's that I understand it's just smoke, and you don't know that there's a fire. But when there's starting to be so much smoke, you have to start wondering if there's a fire. At least ask the question. And
right.
I mean, Tony, where do you fall on this? Do you also go like, are you on Brian's wavelength, or does it not really bother you, or does it start to prickle you a little bit?
I'm sort of on Brian's wavelength, but again, coming from a slightly different perspective, I think it looks terrible. I completely admit that it looks terrible. What I believe, and no one knows, so I'm just going to say what I believe is probably happening, is Donald Trump has spent years as a businessman, and a businessman does what he wants in his business for the most part. If he doesn't like someone's performance, he fires them. And what I think has happened with Comey is Donald Trump, believes he is innocent of the things that he's being accused of. I don't know if he is. You don't know if he is. But he believes he's innocent. In my mind, this is what's happening. And he says, Comey has told me multiple times that there's no evidence here. That's what what Donald Trump has said. And he says, why doesn't he shut this down? There's no evidence. I didn't do it. Why isn't this being shut down? I'm tired of this. Get rid of him. He's not doing what he's supposed to be doing. That's what I think is probably happening.
And you don't think that's a problem?
If I'm innocent and someone's job is to find out that I'm innocent, they've told me that they believe I'm innocent, but they will not. I believe that they're bowing to pressure to keep the investigation on. Why would I want them in a job that I don't think that they're doing properly?
Because that's the way government and democracies work.
But they've had their opportunity. There's no evidence. The former CIA director just went on and said there's no evidence. Well, they're going to investigate for the rest of his term. I mean, that there's a special counsel. Oh, there's a special counsel now. Special counsels dig and dig and dig until they find something. That's what they do.
Okay.
And that's just that's how government works, at least ours. So will they find what they're looking for? I don't know, but will they find something that somebody can hang for? Yes, eventually, whether it's Trump or somebody else.
I think they're going to get Flynn for something.
So if I understand what you're saying correctly, and that's super interesting again, because I don't usually get that kind of feedback in my circles, your feeling now, and tell me if I'm reading this right, is, well, there's a special investigator now, so he's going to find something, but I'm not necessarily going to believe that it's as bad as, liberal would say. If anything less than Trump actually got money from Russia or support from Russia directly, is probably going to be some kind of scapegoating, or is that where your head is?
That's not what I'm saying.
No? Okay.
I'm not saying whatever they find isn't going to be as bad as the left's going to make it out to be. I mean, that might be true. Well, it's almost certainly going to be true. The left's going to blow it way higher than it's going to be. It'd be the same thing if the right was the ones on the hunt.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we've seen it many times over the past few years, especially with Hillary's email, which I'm not saying are, perfect, and they weren't good, but I think we have an example of the right blowing it out of proportion, and the entire left saying that you're blowing it out of proportion. So I think it's fair that, if the
right.
Yeah, we understand each other. Okay, sorry.
Well, I think a better example is the Valerie Plame affair with a special counsel was appointed, and then they found out within 2 to 3 days into the investigation of who leaked her name, but then just kept on going. Richard Armitage was the one that leaked the name. He was Assistant Secretary of State, but that didn't matter. We found it out 2-3 days. Keep on going.
So you feel. So I guess both of you feel like there might be a keep. And I want to get back to Tony because I interrupted you. I'm sorry, but you feel like there might be. We'll see how it goes, but they're never going to stop. And there's a
I think Robert Mueller being the special counsel is very. I'm more confident with him than most anyone that he'll be a straight arrow about it, and that what he says will be what happens. But I think Flynn's going to get in trouble, and but I do think the handling of it was just terrible. Laura Ingraham, who I don't really care for, is a conservative commentator. She said and I agreed with her on this point, was that why didn't they just bring, the way they fired Comey, he was in L.A., they didn't bring him to the White House, they didn't do face-to-face. Why don't you give him a face-saving thing? Hey, we'll make you ambassador to Luxembourg or Bahamas. Something like that. Give him something, something like that, kind of kick him up.
I wouldn't go that far, but I understand.
The way they did it was just horrible. Okay. It just looks terrible.
Tony, finish up your thoughts.
Yeah.
Sorry.
On that note, I think they should have made him put him in a transitional role. Kept him around for a certain amount of time, let him have a say in who his replacement was going to be, something like that. But what I was saying with the special investigator was the onus is on the special investigator to find something, not to find nothing. Right. So
of course
they're going to find something. And that's why I don't like the idea of a special investigator. And the one he was talking about was very real. They found something quickly, but they kept going. And that's why I don't like it.
All right. I want to get to the healthcare question, but of course I'm going to go to Guy as well to ask what, issues of obstruction of justice and corruption are, I'm sure, resonate very much with people in Brazil. What about that Comey thing? Did you guys, discuss it?
I have to admit that I had no idea of that.
Oh, wow.
It was
really?
not that. Yes, really. It was not that big here. We are, yes. I think that I don't watch much TV, but I get the news on Twitter, Facebook, and other Brazilian websites, and that wasn't big. That did not resonate so much here down here.
Very interesting. In Europe, I feel everyone was talking about it. I wonder what's different in the two places.
The thing is, American politics in general are not that. It's not something that Brazilian people talk a lot about, especially international. We had the American election last year. That was a big thing, but that's it. It was not. People don't actually say, okay, if this happens, then this is going to happen to the world. If that happened, then that's going to happen. We are really Brazilian focused on this last few years, actually, on what's happening here. So everything outside, it's not that big a news to us. I actually had no idea. I'm looking more into this right now, actually.
All right. Well, that's, it's funny because that Comey thing, maybe it's because the U.S. impacts Europe and France a little bit more, and we had the elections, so it resonates, yes. But I'm not sure. The Comey thing was definitely discussed. It was the middle of the forming of the government here, so it was definitely not as huge as the other stories, but it was discussed.
Yes, it was not discussed at all. At all.
Okay. The healthcare thing I didn't want to talk to you guys about because I went on a rant about a couple of episodes ago and saying that, I can discuss and understand many points of view about many things, including, abortion, the death penalty, like even global warming. I can understand the discussion, but there's one thing which I don't understand is that hatred that America has for healthcare and socialized healthcare, or I know the term socialized healthcare is kind of like Satan strangling kittens or something, but to you guys, but the rest of the world, the rest of the Western world has a certain system that not only works well to provide healthcare for everyone, really, the essential healthcare. Yes, you might argue, glasses or dental work is not super well covered, but essential things. People don't die in the streets, right? And or don't get bankrupt because they get cancer. And my point that I'm going to summarize from that rant a few episodes ago was arguing that you should let everyone decide whether or not they should get healthcare. If you take it to its logical conclusion, is that it doesn't work, because if someone doesn't get healthcare and gets cancer, the logical conclusion is they didn't get healthcare, so they're not going to get treatment. And so literally we're going to let them die. And I don't think that anyone is going to follow through that logic. Or they get bankrupt, or they have to, And the thing is, I'll let you explain to me how I'm wrong, Brian. But the thing that is the most incredibly frustrating in all of this is that the system works everywhere, and the cost of healthcare per person is incredibly lower everywhere we have, communalized healthcare than in the U.S. It's about, I think, now $9,000 a year per person on average in the U.S., and it's about the closest country after that in that list is like Luxembourg, because they have like a huge aging population, and it's 7,000. And after that, most countries are around 6,000 per year per person. So it makes the system you guys have makes it even more expensive. And I understand Trump wanted to repeal and replace and all of this, but the bill they've put forth in Congress, which, by the way, Senate is apparently not going to vote, and they have their own proposal that they're going to get back with, and it's looking like...
That's how it works.
Yeah, but the one that they put forward is taking away so much and making it, the pre-existing conditions and like all of this. So, but in general, about healthcare, from my point of view, I just don't understand how you could think healthcare shouldn't be treated like the military or the police, or like we put everyone's resources together and we apply it to everyone. And it doesn't work if you let people choose or not choose, choose to get it or not to get it. It just, the system breaks down. So, Brian, that's not how it works. Explain to me how conservatives are not blood-sucking vampires.
Explain the whole system.
No, but explain to me why you think it's okay to let some people not get healthcare and to choose whether or not they should, get healthcare.
I think you have to look at the way the system works, because it's like poor people and the elderly are usually covered. Like the elderly are under Medicare. The poor people or low income people are covered under Medicaid, which is administered through the states, and they get money. The states give money, and then the federal government kicks money. I think that's part of the whole system too. Is that we have 50 states, and they each have their own systems. And the way insurance companies work, they have to have their own separate companies in each of the 50 states. You can't necessarily transport your insurance policy from one state to another state. You'll have to get a whole new insurance and go through the whole process again to get insurance. I think that's part of the issues is to be honest, as a small business owner, I just don't understand why health insurance should be attached so much to your job or to the business you work for. I always thought it should be, you get a policy and you should be able to move it around to wherever you are in the United States. That I understand, the administrative issues, but I think on a philosophical standpoint. But like I said, you start chopping off those edges, and it's like, so then whoever's left over, that's like this middle group that's kind of like that's left over, and they're the ones that have to get the insurance. And it's just the whole. It's very difficult to force something like that on people.
Why? Why? We force people to pay for police. We force people to pay for the military. Why is it difficult to force people to? Why should we not force people to pay for health insurance?
It's just like I said, because like I said, you have to administer it 50 different ways. In France, you have one way.
No, you don't. You make it one way for everyone. Why is it? You don't have.
It's the way the money goes. I'm just telling you, like the 50 states, the federal system, the way it works. It's you have to do it. It's 50 different. You're dealing with 50 different systems.
Well, you have federal systems. You have things that work over. I'm sure income tax is
health insurance. You don't.
No, that's why it needs to be reworked. And on a philosophical from a philosophical standpoint, is it, do you think we should force people, as they do again in most civilized countries? I mean, Canada is federal. There are many places that it is complicated, but on the idea that people should be forced to pay for their health care reduces costs overall, and I don't understand philosophically. Tony, maybe you can explain this to me. Philosophically, how do you justify saying, well, it's okay if some people don't pay, and then, if they don't get healthcare, if they get cancer, well, too bad for them?
Well, first of all, philosophically, I actually struggle with this because, the kind person in me wants everyone to be healthy, right? And but there's downfalls of. I do believe there are downfalls to the systems that everyone gets free healthcare.
Well, it's not free. You have to pay for it, but yeah.
Sure. Well, one thing you said, the person that doesn't have a policy and then gets cancer, we don't just let them die on the street. That's a hyperbole that's thrown out there. That doesn't happen.
What happens?
They're treated.
How do they pay for it?
They either don't, they pay for it out of their pocket, or the hospital takes a hit.
So honestly. You mean,
or the state paid for it through the Medicaid?
Yeah, someone pays for it, but
do you have to sell your house?
Let them die on the street.
Do you sell your house if you have a house to pay for it? Can the insurance companies come after your property?
You don't have.
I don't know the answer to that.
No, they don't do that.
Okay, Brian knows the answer to that.
All right, so literally,
well, like I said, you can get into so much that the problem is the people that have problems are people that actually have something. Maybe they don't have good coverage. or whatever, that's when you start running into the long. It's if you have a chronic condition,
guys. Okay,
that's when you run into big bills. And
but what you're saying, what you're telling me is, well, even if you didn't pay for your insurance, you're going to get treated. So why would anyone ever pay in that case? I don't understand how the system works.
Well, it's not optimal. First of all, someone like me who's responsible for themselves, I don't want to leave the hospital hanging. I don't want other people to have to pay for my stuff. I've had insurance since the moment I got a job, the moment I was eligible for it. And
well, I understand that you're a good person, but let's talk about the person who isn't and who's thinking, what's the downfall for someone if they decide not to pay for the treatment? Not to pay for healthcare, and then they do get cancer.
Good question. I mean, I know for a fact we don't just let people die. So that is a good question. I'm sure there are some expenses to them. There are going to be some out-of-pocket expenses, but if they just have no money, I don't know. Good question. But
Brian,
to go back...
Oh, sorry.
Okay.
Yeah, go ahead, Tony. Go
answer your question on the philosophical level. I do want everyone to be healthy. My issue is how it's different from police and military you start talking about people's personal decisions that affect it, right? You start talking about the person who lives a horrible life that now the society at large has to pay for them to be healthy when they've made awful, stupid, ridiculous decisions to get to that point. And your level
I'm not sure
of
I understand what you're saying. Like someone who...
I'm saying the meth addict, and we have a huge meth problem in my area, all over the country, but in my area of the country especially, it's a big deal. Do I want them to die? No. Do I want my money? I mean, do I want to pay for them? Not really, but so that's where my struggle comes from. I want to be able to choose to pay for them, right? And that's where charity comes in. I believe charity is a real option. There are charitable hospitals, and that's a big deal. But also, the level of healthcare declines under these socialized systems.
What?
Canada,
No.
You mentioned. Why do Canadians come to the United States to get healthcare?
Oh, that is... Oh, my God. No, that is not what... Maybe some super rich Canadian will come to get, the best possible healthcare. I'm sure that for someone who has a lot of money, I'm certain the U.S. can provide the best possible healthcare in the world.
Yes.
I'm fairly sure, however, that most Canadians are very happy with their own healthcare in their own country. I can tell you that in France, for example, where we are very socialized in many things, we get great healthcare, and we get it at 50% less overall per person, all of that, than you guys do in the U.S. with your system. So for the good of society, everyone would pay less if everyone was paying a little bit.
Well,
but you know what? Maybe we can get back to it. I know that Guy has to leave fairly soon, although, Tony, maybe you do have to leave fairly soon as well.
Well, I have a little bit of leeway, but definitely if Guy has to leave, we need to get his thoughts in.
And we'll get back to this in a second because
I want to hear about Brazil.
Unfortunately, we can't solve healthcare in 10 minutes, and that's a tragedy. I was certain we were going to do it. But yeah, Guy, so first of all, maybe tell us about how healthcare works in your country, and then tell us about that crazy presidential scandal you're having.
Mm-hmm. Sure. Healthcare here is a little complicated. You have pretty much two ways to have healthcare. The first one is through your job. So your employer is going to pay for your healthcare, or you pay it yourself. If you don't have any of the two ones, so for instance, you don't have a job and you can't afford healthcare, you can use the public system. But the public system doesn't work. It doesn't work at all. There are huge lines of people that are waiting 2 to 3 days to get a visit with a doctor. So people tend to just go away from the public services. And healthcare here is actually divided. You guys were saying that it is divided by your job. Then each time you get a new job, you have to get a new healthcare. Is that right?
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah, basically.
In a lot of cases, yeah.
Here it is divided by your profession. So if you are, so if you're an engineer, if you're a doctor, if you're like me, I work with marketing and publicity, you're going to go to certain groups. Okay, so I'm in the publicity group, and there I can have like these healthcares. I choose one, and I start paying for it, and it is mine forever until the end of days. Or until I get really sick and have to change to some other that covers something bigger.
It seems like, what I get away from all of this is all of these systems look really complicated and unnecessary. Just do what we do in France, have socialized healthcare for everyone to cover the basics. Yes, sometimes there are going to be things that don't work, and you have an additional thing that you can choose to pay for or not, or a little bit or more to get more healthcare for the less essential things. Just do that, you'll be fine. But okay,
I completely agree with that.
Thank you, Guy. We might get back to it because I want to discuss this a little bit more. But the presidential scandal. What the hell is happening in Brazil?
First of all, so that you can understand what's happening right now, you have to understand a little bit more about Brazil, especially that we have two different kinds of police. Okay, we have a federal police, and a civil police. The civil police is the day-to-day police, okay, the ones that you see in the streets, the ones who are gonna get like a bank robber or something, and the federal police is it's someone who's only going to deal with bigger scandals, okay, like corruption. Someone it's only the federal police who is going to go and arrest a politician, for instance. So since 2014, we are in the middle of a federal police operation which is called Lava Jato. It is like car wash, okay? It's like the car wash operation, something like that. And
that sounds like quite a program.
Yeah, and it is focused on getting, on fighting corruption and looking and arresting people that are actively corrupting the governmental system, okay?
How did that get about? Like, how do you kickstart a movement like this if the government, my impression is that the Brazilian government is quite corrupted. So how do you even enable something like that without it being shut down by the people in the government that are corrupt?
So what happened was that a judge from a city, quite a big city here in Brazil, Curitiba, he said that pretty much, okay, I want to do this and I'm going to do this. We are going to go ahead and arrest these corrupt politicians. And as then there's a little bit of law, like if you are the judge of a city here, you can pretty much say that the federal police has to obey you unless someone higher up than you says otherwise, okay? So when he kickstarted the Lava Jato operation, the media went on a frenzy. And everyone thought that, okay, if someone says, okay, now you have to stop this, it means that this person is corrupt and is hiding something and is afraid to do something. Okay?
So that's basically media pressure helped the judicial...
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And it is a 40-phase operation. We just entered the 41st phase of the operation today. And almost 100 people have been under arrest and are in jail right now, and all of them are politicians. That
seems like an incredibly hopeful thing. Like everyone would be happy and dancing in the streets right now.
Yes, but it's not quite like that. That started in 2014. In 2015, I'm not sure right now. I think, yes, in 2015 we re-elected our previous president, which was Dilma Rousseff. We re-elected her, and it was literally the middle of the operation. Then in 2016, some big scandal broke out that she was paying out people to keep quiet about corruption. And then we impeached her in 2016. And now we have our new president, which is Michel Temer, which is the big problem right now. He is the big bad from Brazil right now. So what happens? In this operation, in Operação Lava Jato, these judge made some agreements with big companies like Odebrecht. Have you ever heard of it? It is a really big construction company. They have an agreement with this judge that they are going to tell everything they know about Brazilian corruption. And they had the same agreement with another big company called JBS, which is also Brazilian Foods. The name of the company. They sell food. And the president of JBS, he said to the media that he had taped Michel Temer, our president, paying out people to keep quiet. And then he released that tape. It was last week. Real. It was Wednesday. And it was real. And it was really him that was talking. There's no denying that it was Michel Temer saying, okay, we got to pay up these people so that they keep quiet, so that our schemes are able to keep going. And it completely blew up. He had to make like an urgent declaration to everyone. He went out in the public and pretty much said everyone was hoping that he was going to step down as president, because there is no way, and no one can see a way that he could still be a president after that. And he went out in the public and said, you know what, I'm not going to step down. That was not me. I tried to listen to that recording, but they didn't let me, and it was not me. I didn't do that. I would never do that. Screw you all, pretty much. And now the president from JBS, which is named Joesley, he has been threatened. He and his family have been threatened. They are actually in New York right now. And he can't come back to Brazil, because if he does, things are going to happen. And everyone is, and there is a new impeachment process happening right now to impeach our current president. And if it happens, we will have no president, pretty much. We will be a country without a president.
Yeah.
I tried to sum it all up as quickly as possible, but it's pretty much that it's a lot more complicated. There are a lot more ramifications to what's going to happen, what already happened. But it's pretty much that our president is really corrupt. He pays out people to keep quiet so that they can steal money. And there's one more thing.
Oh my God, there's more?
There's the drug thing.
Of course there is. It's South America. Of course there's a drug thing.
There is a drug thing. There is a senator, which is called Aécio Neves. He is a very good friend of our president, Michel Temer. A really, really, really good friend. And a couple years ago, they found his helicopter completely stuffed up with cocaine. Okay? Like piles and piles and piles of cocaine. I think it was.
So he's just going to a party.
Yeah, pretty much. And he said, okay, this is not mine. I have no idea how that ended up there. I am not going to do anything. And he was not arrested. And nothing ever happened to him. After that recording of Michel Temer went out, he was mentioned in that recording that he wanted 200,000 reais, which is around... I think somewhere between $60,000 and $70,000. He wanted 200,000 reais to keep quiet, and some security that he wouldn't ever be arrested for that cocaine. And that blew up at the same time as the Michel Temer paying out everyone. That's pretty much what's happening right now. It's chaotic. There are happening many riots. I'm going to look for. There are some pictures actually from riots that happened yesterday and on Wednesday, where people set the field between the presidential house and the street on fire. It's things are getting pretty rough.
Mm. So
That's terrible.
Yeah, it sounds pretty bad. Okay, so it's funny. I think because we've had so much, we heard a little bit about it, but of course not as much in detail. I'm curious if you guys in the U.S. heard about that as well.
Yeah, I've read a little bit. Like the Wall Street Journal is usually pretty good, but I got to say I know a little bit, but not nearly as much as what Guy just told us. I'd also like to hear about what's going on in Venezuela affecting Brazil at all?
Not much actually.
Okay,
not
good.
much because Venezuela is not really. How can I say? It's not really. They're not part of the same South American group as we are. So
Mercosur, something like that.
yeah, it's Mercosur. So their politics don't affect us directly.
Okay.
All right. Well, Tony has dropped off. He's going to try and come back in just a second, but I think you have to go, Guy. So
Yes,
I don't want to.
it's my time.
No
problem.
Thank you so much for being on. I know you're a
it's good
podcaster
here.
as well. So
Thank you very much
Great
for
job.
the
Thank
invitation.
you.
do you want to let people know where they can get some of your content? I'm going to put the links to the show notes, to your Twitter account in the show notes. But
sure, you can follow me on Twitter at Sleipnir. And I myself have a podcast. It is in Portuguese, and it is about depression and how to face it. I haven't recorded an episode in forever, pretty much, but I'll send Patrick the links, and you can put it in the show notes.
All right.
So that's pretty much it. And
All right,
thank you for the invitation.
Thank you very much for being with us, and good luck on your long day ahead.
Thank you all. Bye-bye.
Bye, Guy. All right. Tony, you're back?
I believe so.
Yes.
Can you hear me okay?
Yep. Perfectly.
Yep.
Awesome.
All right. So I think we're just going to finish off on the healthcare thing, and then I'm also going to ask you guys, what made the news for you, but I'm pretty sure we covered it already. But so on the healthcare thing, there's this, you were saying, Tony, that you don't want people who make bad decisions for themselves to, get money that they don't deserve, kind of, because they made their own bad decisions, and get the very expensive healthcare. Well, I don't know how to put it, because that's you're saying that if you make the bad decision, it feels bad that we have to pay for your poor judgment, is what you're saying, right?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. It does feel bad, and like I said, I do struggle with this because I do feel compassion. It's not that I'm just this heartless person. It's like, no, it's my money. You can't have it. But I think that's there's a bit of unfairness there to me that a productive, healthy individual is paying into this system. Someone that isn't healthy and maybe not productive is not, and they're getting the same stuff. That, to me, there's a level of feels bad man there.
I think that idea of fairness, I think everyone gets. It's not like in countries that have socialized medicine, we're like, oh yeah, no problem at all, it's fine. You smoked crack all your life, and you've turned down every job that was ever offered to you, and that's fine. I think there's context where we understand that probably a lot of the people that end up being drug addicts for a number of reasons that aren't just, I don't care about anything and I'm going to smoke drugs, I'm going to smoke crack. There's social context and maybe medical issues and a number of things, but we also understand that. But then the sentiment of fairness isn't completely foreign to us as well. But I would argue you could, in theory, make it for police as well. You know, you could say if you don't, I don't know, but like you could say if you don't pay for police, we're not going to get to your neighborhood. Like when you call for 911, I understand it doesn't work perfectly, but if you call 911, we're not going to go to your place because you didn't pay for the police. We could argue, yes, everyone can do what they want, and someone's going to say, I'm going to get a shotgun and defend my own home, so I don't have to pay those extra, $100 a month for.
Hell yeah.
No, but I understand the logic on a fundamental level. I understand the logical path there, but you also understand that it still means the system would degrade. And what is difficult for me to wrap my head around is it's the same for healthcare. If not everyone is participating, the system does degrade as it is degraded in the U.S. And yes, you might have to pay for some people who maybe quote unquote don't deserve it. I think a lot of people will deserve it, and they're just people who happen to be happen to get, I keep going to the idea of cancer because it's the one, illness that no one has any control over. Not the one, but it's probably the biggest one, the one that resonates with the most people.
Right.
And some people might be the horrible, crackheads that we all hate. I'm speaking in jest here. And most people are going to be regular people that just happen to fall ill or to have an accident in the street or, all of these. And so in order for the system to work and not degrade, it's still everyone has to play the game, right? So I wonder, Tony, if that, if that speaks to you or if you're still iffy on the idea.
Well, Patrick, the last thing I want you to do is think you changed my mind, because I would hate for you to think that you have that kind of effect on me. But honestly, as far as the left's talking points, the left side's talking points, healthcare is probably the one that I come the closest to them on. My son my oldest son has a pre-existing condition, so I understand what they're talking about. So of all of the issues, that's probably the one that I'm the closest to them on. Like, yeah, let's just do it. I want a good system that's not going to fall apart. I want, the doctors to still get the compensation that's going to make the smartest, most brilliant people want to be doctors and things like that. But yeah, I'm pretty close to that.
It's funny because every time I talk about healthcare with most people, even people I'm surprised I get into these kinds of conversation, and most of the time, ultimately, when we get to the bottom of it, most people kind of agree. They're like, yeah, okay, I'm not married to that. I'm not super anti-healthcare. It's not like a philosophical difference that is completely irreconcilable. That word. That, yeah. And yet, I think what Trump was selling before he was elected was a better healthcare system, and it really doesn't seem to be what's in the bill that Congress voted. But so I wonder because most people who voted for him are the people who are affected by a bad healthcare system, and it seems like the one that they're working towards in Congress is one that benefits mostly people who can afford to pay for healthcare and not the ones that actually need it. So I don't understand how that the logic.
Obamacare was not some great plan that did everything for everybody. I mean, that's it's going broke. Insurers, insurance companies are leaving states.
I'm not disputing that.
Got like one insurer left.
I'm not disputing it. I think, and I would argue that many of the fallings of Obamacare were because he didn't manage to go far enough. He managed to pass something that wasn't the ideal one he wanted because of the arguments in Congress. But ultimately, I think it seems to me like a lot of people either are for healthcare or now starting to think, well,
It's
whatever,
just not
let's
that
do it.
easy. It's just not that easy, Patrick. It's a very complicated subject, full of nuance, and it's just
as most
you gotta
are.
go.
But
yeah, it is, and it's like it's just one of those things where, well, if you're going to do that, then hey, let's talk about tort reform. We need to address that too. I don't know what happens in France, but here the Trial Lawyer Association keeps that going, so you can sue everybody, and it's just.
Yeah,
like
but healthcare is basically healthcare is one of those things that is on the fundamental level, and everyone, I understand that you're Americans and that you don't care about what any of the world thinks, but everyone agrees, No, of course, I know it's not true, but doesn't it faze you that everyone else agrees? Everyone is like, our systems aren't perfect. They're better than yours, right?
I look at it from the point of view is this, that you got to be here and you got to see how it works before you can really start saying. And it's just, like I said, it's very complicated. There's like many issues.
A cop out,
it's 20% of the. It's
that's
not really a cop out,
Brian.
It's not
saying
really,
it's complicated.
You want to distill it down to like you like it or you don't, yes or no, and that you can't do that. It's just not possible.
Is it possible on? I think it's possible on many topics, and you would tell me that it's possible on many topics. I'm not,
Depends.
Okay, without going into the specifics, would you be for a system where everyone has to pay?
It would depend.
On what?
It would depend on how it's been, who's administrating it, how they're going to go through the states. Is the federal government in charge? Well, it goes through a lot of. Like I said, it depends on how you put it together. And it depends on how it gets put together and how it's going to be run and how it's going to,
Okay, all right. It's complicated.
I'm just saying. It's
on
like,
this.
You
I
want to
understand.
say
on this one, I think it's
off, but it's just not how it works. It's never going to be how it works.
When you look at systems in other countries for healthcare,
right.
We're not talking about morality here. We're not talking about, is it okay to end a pregnancy? We're not talking, although that plays into it as well in other ways, but we're not talking about, is it okay to take a life if someone has committed a heinous crime? We're not talking about choices that are incredibly morally difficult. We're talking about looking in other countries. Does the system administratively, systematically, does it work better or not? And in every country except the US, there are systems where medicine is somewhat socialized that work better and cost less than what you have in the US. Do you really think that it's complicated? It's complicated, and we have 50 states. Means you can't implement something that is somewhat similar that would work for you guys?
No, what I'm saying is that it's very difficult to implement something with 50 states involved that they can all agree on, and that's how it is.
The core question there is, the way I understand it, is the only one that really matters is, do we want everyone to be forced to pay something? That's the core one. And again, the way I understand it is the one that people are the most divided on. And if you don't agree that everyone should pay, then the system breaks down, right? After that, you can implement some form of it. But if you don't agree on that basis, the system breaks down. And that's why I keep coming back to that question. But I don't see how it can be. I mean, I understand it's complicated, but I don't think it's complicated in how you implement it. It's not complicated in whether or not you implement it. Does that make sense?
I just, like I said, Obamacare got passed, with a supermajority in the House, supermajority in the Senate, and it was still, lacking. And
because not everyone's paying. Side. Because you can decide whether or not you pay.
Well, yeah, that's part. Well, and that's part of it too. I mean, they opened up the insurance pools, and then like you said, people didn't. Well, they kind of had to pay, but they could choose between a fine or paying for insurance. And in a lot of cases, the fine was cheaper than paying for the insurance.
So and people decided not to pay.
Yeah, and the insurance costs went up. I know
because
mine
not
did.
Everyone, because not everyone was paying.
Yeah, but
I mean,
it's hard.
Again,
I'll tell you what. I have a small business, and I remember before Obamacare, I would offer these actually reasonably priced health insurance for my employees, and most of my employees were under 30, and guys and they're under 30, and I'd get maybe 2 or 3, like out of 50 guys, like 2 or 3 would choose to do it. To buy insurance, and like I said, a reasonably priced. Now that reasonable price is gone. I mean, it's going to be a lot more expensive. It's going to be a bit more expensive for them, for someone in that position, someone that's in their 20s. Right. I'm healthy, and all that stuff.
But you understand that in the other countries, healthcare per person is significantly lower.
Oh, I do. No, right? I agree. Yeah, I understand that. Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
All right. Well. At least I made some headway with Tony, and we sort of got to almost an agreement. I think Brian is a lost cause. I'm not gonna.
Patrick, that was not you.
Actually, I'm in.
You.
Actually, I'm in.
Sorry, Tony. Let's set the record straight. It wasn't me. You were already kind of on the fence, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Fair enough. On this topic, I think it's my how do you call it? Like in French, you say cheval de bataille, like the one issue I would go to war on almost. Right. So I'll take what I can get. Tony, if I reveal that
at 5 in the morning, Patrick, come on.
Sorry, Brian?
You're hitting us with it at 5 in the morning. You want to talk about healthcare. Like, oh man.
That's true. It is very early for you. And I think I really want to thank both of you. It's not as early for you, Tony, so you get less of a pass. But we did end up closer than I did with
I thought we were going to talk more about Trump, to be honest. That's what I was expecting,
Yeah, well, really kind of is late.
Healthcare to pop up.
I guess you guys have to go. Anything else you want to cover very quickly before we end the show? Or are we good?
I'd be interested just really quickly to talk about the Gianforte thing. I'm sure you guys have heard of the politician from Montana that assaulted the reporter, and he won. He still won his election.
Oh, he did? I didn't realize. Was it yesterday?
It was yesterday, and he won. And
so let me explain very quickly for people who might have not heard of it. Basically, it was an election. Is it senatorial or congressional?
I think it's
for the House.
For the House. Okay, so Congress. And he was having a discussion with a journalist that was being a little bit forceful, or at least, asking questions and wanting to get an answer. And he body slammed the guy. I'm joking. It's not funny at all. He physically restrained the guy and threw him away. And of course, there was the recording that was the recording audio that was showing this, or we could hear it, what was happening. And it doesn't sound good for Gianforte at all.
And there was a Fox News crew setting up for an interview in the room at the time. Yeah, they saw the whole thing.
Yeah. So he won, Tony?
So he did win, and I don't like that. I think it really shows that the American people are seeing elections at this point of a lesser of two evils nearly every time. There are certain situations where it's not that case, I think we, or the government, the Senate, the House need to stand up and say, we're not going to seat people, that are convicted of a felon. Now, of course, he wasn't convicted. It's a not apples to apples comparison, but we're getting to the point where both Republicans and Democrats, they'll just overlook the worst kind of behaviors just to get their guy into office, and it kind of makes me sick. I'm not saying I don't know anything about the race. I don't know if the other guy was a complete lunatic or what, but I think you could say that this guy might be a complete lunatic since he's body slamming reporters. I mean, that's not okay. But it really put a bad taste in my mouth. And this guy's supposed to be my guy as a Republican, but I did not like it. So that's what I wanted to say about that.
I think there's a lot to be said about the party itself, possibly in the Democratic Party as well, but now the Republicans are under the limelight. And I think you're saying, Congress or Senate shouldn't stand for this. I think it's the party's job. And the interesting thing is that with lesser intensity, in France, we've had the same issue. It's not you guys in America do everything bigger, so for you guys it's body slamming reporters. For us it was corruption issues. And I think the big message that we got thanks to our multi-party system was that we got a guy in who was sending the message, as we said, we don't want the old parties anymore. You need to rethink what you're doing. Basically, it was a message saying, go to your room and think about what you've done for the past 50 years. And one of those issues was corruption. I think in the U.S., one of those issues would be extreme partisanship. For us as well, we were tired of people saying, one of the things Macron is saying is we need to work together. Doesn't matter if you're left or right. When there's a good idea, even if it comes from the other side, you should be able to rally around it. And that was a very powerful message that Macron was carrying. And it's a shame that in the U.S. you don't have the ability to with your two-party system, you don't have the ability to truly make that work. And I would add that with the two-party system, that's something I was thinking about earlier. The problem is you really only have two options, and you can't imagine that anyone is out of two options on everything. Anyone is going to be right all the time. And that's the proposition that you guys in the US are given. You're giving a proposition of parties saying there's only two parties and the other one is always wrong. That's just like impossible. You can't be right all the time or wrong all the time. Right? And it frustrates me very much. It did in France, and it does in the US even more, that you have this ingrained feeling that the guys on the other side are always wrong, no matter what they do. And even on this show, even with everything I try to do to bring people together and to talk, it feels sometimes like this, even here. So, I mean, I expanded a little bit on what you were saying, Tony, but yeah, Brian, what did you think about? Yeah,
it's going to take a systemic change to change. I mean, it would take a massive overhaul to change the two-party system, of course.
And
I don't see that happening.
And the worst thing is that Trump could have done that. He could have, if he was someone more intelligent or crafty or well-intentioned, maybe, I don't know what, but he could have done that. He could have done something. And it seems the biggest disappointment, I think, for Trump is that he feels like he's just a Republican. Just if you take away the negative connotation to that, in the end, he's in power and he's a Republican, just like every other Republican. Yes, more colorful, more clumsy, more quirky, but he's not looking to change the system, right? I mean, sorry.
That's very tough, It's like steering a super tanker, It's. I mean, he is more of a disruptor than I think, any other candidate's been in a long time.
Is he beyond his theatrics on Twitter? Is he? It doesn't seem like
I get that to a point. I mean, it's funny because he comes into office. He was talking all this stuff on the foreign policy. We don't need NATO and all this, and then it's like, well, he's walked back about 90% of that.
Yeah. And I mean, the healthcare thing is not
his foreign policy stuff is actually getting much more on the reasonable side. You're kind of like, oh, okay, he's not blowing things up, So it's like, oh, okay.
Well, yeah. I mean, yeah, he's also not, obviously, he's not doing the wall, but that's, again, theatrics. He's not draining the swamp, I think, is the most frustrating thing. He's putting...
He didn't talk
he's putting his family in the White House. I mean, that, it should bother people. And it only bothers... The problem is, to me, it only bothers the opposition. It should bother everyone. He's not drowning the swamp at all. That could have been something interesting. Drainings, thank you. Sorry. But yeah, getting back to the John Forte. Any comments, Brian?
About what? About what?
About,
I'm sorry?
Frente Forte being elected, even though he body slammed.
Oh, yeah, that guy. Yeah, I just, I don't think it was, him winning's not a good thing, It's just kind of like, I think he should have lost, to be honest, and if it had happened like a week before election, he probably would have lost, but they had a lot of
Montana,
balloting are there, so that's probably what it is.
One thing does bring me a little bit of hope. It's that Fox News is apparently losing ratings. They're down a little bit, and I think it does. Yeah. I think it does show that even the Republic. Of course, you're going to have the 20% on the left and on the right, and it's the same in France. It's the same everywhere. Who are never going to change their opinions on anything. But I think it shows that the Republican base is thinking, all right, that's too much. That's not like actively politically shaking their fist in the air, but going like, all right, I don't really believe in that crap anymore.
Well, you also got to factor in they lost Bill O'Reilly, for the massive stuff, and then Megyn Kelly had left at the beginning of the year or whatever, or late last year, and those are their two big stars. So, and then it looks like Hannity, who I don't care for. I don't really care for Hannity at all. He's having troubles now because he's pushing some DNC staffer's murder as some kind of conspiracy theory, thing.
The Donald on Reddit is also very upset about this, saying it's some kind of conspiracy to it's some kind of it seems like it's going more along the lines of the pizza place child porn thing, It's just like, and Hannity is anyway, Hannity is special.
That's good.
Okay, I think I even would like to ask about the InfoWars aberration thing, but maybe we don't have time. Maybe that would be for another day.
I probably do need to head out.
Okay, all right. It's been a good show already. Let's end on the note that maybe people are coming back down to earth on the partisanship, or maybe one day.
Yeah, I don't think so.
You don't think so? I'll be honest. I don't really. Looking at France, I'm thinking maybe there is. Really, the two-party system is we need an independent that stands a chance. And I think with the disappointment that people are having in the system, even with Trump not blowing everything up, I think it's fair to say, I think there's a chance for an independent to actually do something in 4 years. And by the way, I predict that Trump is not going to run in 4 years again. I think the GOP is not going to let him. I understand they can't, force him to drop out. They can do a primary, but I think they're gonna, if he runs again, I think they're gonna present someone, do the, it's cool, we're gonna have primary, we have to decide again. And my inkling is that he's actually gonna say, I was the best president. You've never seen a president like me, but now I have a business to run, and he's gonna go and he's not gonna run again.
Possible. I think it depends on the economy. Like I told you, I think it's 100% on how the economy is going.
You know what? If the economy is going super well, everything will be fixed. Everyone will be happy, and I'll even be happy to have Trump again. If he manages to because if you guys do well, I'm pretty sure we're going to be doing well as well. So I'll be happy.
Right.
All right. Thank you so much to both of you for being on. As always, can you tell me where we can find you on the internet, if at all, Tony?
Sure. You can find me on Twitter at Tony Staley, and that's pretty much the only place I am.
Excellent. I will have the Twitter account in the show notes, of course. Brian, what about you?
You can find me on Twitter at BHess, BHESS, and I would say if you're interested, read the articles in the Wall Street Journal about Venezuela. Mary O'Grady has written some really good columns about that lately, so it's very interesting.
There you go. I think that's your favorite publication. You always refer to it.
It is. It's among them, yeah.
Yeah. All right. My Twitter account is Not Patrick. I'm also Not Patrick on Facebook. If you want to follow me there, you can find the show notes at FrenchSpin.com. And you can, of course, comment over there if you wish to. There's also iTunes, of course, or any other podcast catalog. If you can go there and leave us a review and a few stars. You could be like Slapiel from the UK, who says, a great solution to echo chambers. In this age of echo chambers, this podcast allows you to hear a balanced view on the world's current events, much needed in these day and age. If you ask me, keep it up, guys. Thank you so much. And if you also think that you should, that people should listen to the show, one of the ways to let people know is through iTunes. You can, of course, refer people to the show by social network and all of that. I'm sure you know the ways. And, of course, you can support the show on Patreon at patreon.com/The Phileas Club. The address is in the show notes and everywhere. It takes about a minute and a half to sign up and contribute. I, of course, can't thank the patrons enough for their support. This is what keeps the show going. And if you think that these kinds of things should be supported, if you think that this show is worth something to you, then you might consider dropping the price of a cup of coffee on the show for each episode. That would be immensely appreciated. It is at patreon.com/The Phileas Club. Thanks to all the patrons. Thank you for listening, and we'll talk to you in the next one. Oh, and of course, before I forget, Turkey's summary of the Trump trip in the Middle East is coming right after this.
Hello, everyone on the Phileas Club, and hi, Patrick. Sorry I couldn't join you today live, but as to Patrick's request, this is a quick update from Saudi Arabia. In the news recently, apparently Trump has decided to make his first foreign trip to Saudi Arabia. And the Saudi government has taken full advantage of this. The Saudi government, of course, has decided to have 3 summits in Saudi Arabia. The first one was the Saudi-U.S. summit. Second was the GCC, Gulf Cooperation Council U.S. summit, and the Arab Islamic U.S. summit. Saudi Arabia invited over 50 world leaders from the Islamic and Arab world to attend this summit, and the entire country has been in celebration and anticipation of this. There were multiple events to celebrate this visit. Saudi Arabia has, especially the entertainment authorities, we had some local concerts with some American musicians. There were some American sports teams and so on that were participating and competing against local teams, and so on. Of course, Ivanka was here and Milena, and they've been visiting around and meeting with different people. We had also a Twitter event where Trump was supposed to be speaking in. Apparently, at the last minute, he decided not to, as he was tired, apparently. So I think that's basically general news. I think what's major about this is that Saudi Arabia has taken full advantage of this to show itself as representing the entire Islamic and Arab world in its relationship with the U.S. It is the first country Trump visits. It's also where he met with majority of the Islamic and Arab countries under the sponsorship of the Saudi government. He also has shown support to the Saudi government against Iran, as declaring Iran a vessel of terrorism, and so on. Now, within Saudi, the population apparently has celebrated this in general. Of course, there's always exceptions. And the celebration was mostly meant because of the support we've received from Trump against Iran. Of course, there is a very anti-Iranian sentiment in Saudi. It's basically a sentiment that resides in a lot of countries around the world where Sunnis and Shias, there's a little, or some even more than little, dislike between these two sects. So this was celebrated in Saudi media and by the Saudi population as a success for Saudi Arabia, the government of Saudi Arabia. Of course, there were multiple economical deals. There were over, I think, 400 billion US dollars worth of deals signed. 110 billion of those, I believe, were in Saudi buying weapons from the US and other projects, business deals and economic projects between the two countries. Now, for those, we'll have to wait and see the results of those agreements. But other than that, I think the biggest news was Ivanka apparently was very popular on Twitter and Saudi Twitter. What else? The most funny part of this entire event was that the U.S. press corps making a big fuss about finding international restaurants in Riyadh city, which is apparently, I guess, a lot of them thought Riyadh was basically a desert and camels, not a metropolitan area like any other metropolitan area in the world, basically. Other than that, we had cultural events to celebrate this visit. I believe we had a country musician, artist from the U.S., Tony Keith or something. Sorry, no offense, but I don't know any musicians, period. I'm not really a music person. And he had a concert with a local musician. So we had U.S. country music with the local Saudi music, and they're celebrating together. That was an event. Another event, there was basketball between a U.S. team and a local team. There were some car racings between a U.S. team and a local team, and multiple other events to celebrate the cultural relationships between the U.S. and Saudi Arabia. As I said, the reaction has been mostly positive in Saudi. There was some hate mostly from outside Saudi, those who from other Arab countries or some Islamic countries, either because of the attack that Trump and the U.S. government had on Iran. So those were big supporters of Iran. There were others who thought that the money, the agreement, especially the one on weapons that the Saudi and U.S. governments have signed, was mismanagement of Islamic and Arab wealth, and that money should have been spent on supporting other Arab and Islamic countries. So you have all of these type of people. There were some voices from inside Saudi that opposed this on different levels, different reasons, but they were very low voices compared to what you would expect. And I think the major reason is the anti-Iranian sentiment has helped to dull those voices a lot in Saudi. So that's a quick update in Trump's trip to Saudi Arabia. I hope that's helpful, and I hope I can be on the next Phileas Club Live, and we can have a more active discussion on this matter. Thanks, Patrick, and see you all later. Bye.